Michael Gove there, Levelling Up Secretary. Now, we were talking an awful lot about security issues in that interview, and Labour says it will try to use parliamentary tactics to force the government to disclose any security assessments of the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, before she was reappointed by the Prime Minister. Now, that, of course, was just 6 days after she resigned for breaking the ministerial code. Well, we can talk now to Labour's Shadow Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, who joins us now live. Before we get to Braverman, I'm interested in the story, extraordinary story, on the front page of the Mail about Liz Truss's phone reportedly being compromised. Now, Michael Gove said he wasn't across the details in the interview earlier, but what is your response to these allegations?
Well, clearly these are very serious allegations. It raises issues around cybersecurity. It's why cybersecurity has to be taken so seriously by everyone across government, at the role of hostile states, but also the allegations about whether a cabinet minister has been using a personal phone for serious government business, and serious questions about why this information or this story has been leaked or briefed right now. And all of these, I think, just go to the heart of this, raising questions about the way in which the government is not taking seriously enough national security. And, of course, the serious problem is the person who ought to be providing reassurance that the government has a grip, the person who ought to be doing interviews this morning about all of this is the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, and she can't do that because she's still unable to answer those serious questions about her own security breaches and lapses. And that's why I think this is a problem really for Rishi Sunak, not simply the story this morning about Liz Truss.
You say about questions about why it was leaked now. What do you mean by that?
Well, there's just a question about why this story, which obviously has implications for national security itself, is now being briefed or been leaked today as well. So as well as the actual events that have taken place, I think it's really just important that I really hope that this hasn't been leaked, for example, to try and distract from some of the other things that are happening, because obviously I think actually it does the opposite and just raises wider concerns about the way in which the government is not taking seriously enough these issues around national security.
You, of course, have been very strong in calling for more information about what happened with Suella Braverman. She resigned, of course, after emailing those papers from a personal email account. What exactly are you calling for?
Excuse me, just putting an umbrella up, Sophie. It's getting quite wet here.
Thanks for battling
So
weather.
we think that we have to have proper answers about whether or not this was the first security breach from Suella Braverman. We think that the papers and the warnings that were provided by the Cabinet Office and by the Cabinet Secretary to the Prime Minister should be sent to the Intelligence and Security Committee. So far, we have been asking repeatedly whether the Home Secretary has used her personal phone to send other government documents. There's also questions about whether she was investigated for other security leaks, including around a case involving the security service and around a case involving sensitive legal advice around Northern Ireland. Now, this is just irresponsible. You can't have a Home Secretary who is not trusted by the security service, who is not trusted with important government information. And it really shows the huge error of judgment that Rishi Sunak has made in reappointing someone just 6 days after she broke the ministerial code over security lapses, reappointing her to this immensely serious position. National security is too important for this kind of chaos, confusion and really irresponsible decision-making.
Now, there are reports in the Sunday Times that Suella Braverman ignored the legal advice that the government was illegally detaining thousands of asylum seekers at Manston Processing Centre in Kent. Michael Gove acknowledged to us on the programme earlier that it's not good enough, that more needs to be done. What exactly should happen to those families, do you think, and how much would it cost, given the premium that Labour is putting on making sure everything you're announcing is fully costed?
There is an immediate action that the Home Secretary needs to take to make sure that the Home Office is compliant with the law, to make sure that you don't have the kinds of shocking conditions that the inspector has described, with an Afghan family in a marquee for 32 days and overcrowding that appears to have led to a diphtheria outbreak in the UK as a result of the Home Office not responding properly. But look, there is a wider issue here, that this is a result of the collapse in asylum decision-making. They're only taking half the number of asylum decisions that they were taking 5 or 6 years ago. That has led to a huge backlog and, of course, a failure to have a proper deal and agreement in place with France or to crack down on the criminal gangs, so we're not preventing a lot of these dangerous boat crossings in the first place. And really the irresponsible issue is that government is still pursuing spending £140 million now on a Rwanda deal that the Home Secretary herself has admitted is failing. That money, it should be cut and put into cracking down on the criminal gangs instead, and that would help address some of these problems.
It's difficult, though, isn't it? Because I know, as you will acknowledge, there are record numbers of small boats crossing the Channel. Everyone is grappling to try and find a way out of this. And, people have talked about cracking down on the criminal gangs before. It's not that easy, though, is it? If it was that easy, everyone would just click their fingers and do it.
Nothing is easy in this, but there hasn't been a serious strategy to tackle the criminal gangs. We've seen a huge proliferation. They've effectively created a multi-million-pound criminal industry on the Channel over the last few years. This has increased very dramatically just over the last few years.
So what
and there hasn't been enough action by both French and British authorities to deal with it. So I think what you need, we've proposed a new cell, an elite unit as part of the National Crime Agency with hundreds of specialist officers to work with Europol, with the French authorities, to actually crack down on those criminal gangs and to get some prosecutions. We've seen in other areas of serious organised crime, when there have been substantial prosecutions, it has had an impact on the whole network. At the moment, for many of these criminal gangs, they see this as a cost-free crime because the costs and the risks are in people's lives being put at risk in the Channel, and that is what is so dangerous, and that's where they should be cracking down. The government instead has spent another £20 million just in the last 3 months on the Rwanda deal, which is actually in danger of increasing trafficking and increasing that criminal gang activity. That's been the evidence from other countries. So that's on top of the £120 million they've already spent. So I think that they are focusing on headlines rather than the hard work that's actually needed to tackle this problem.
Just finally, because you are, I can see, battling with the rain, which we do appreciate, of course. And I want to start this question by acknowledging that Labour is still very, very clearly ahead in the polls. But according to opinion, there are some issues the government has regained a lead over, with a 4-point lead on Labour on the economy, a 7-point lead on defence, a 5-point lead on dealing with terrorism. Do you think Rishi Sunak is more formidable opposition than Liz Truss?
No, I think he is part of 12 years of Conservative government that has caused deep damage to this country. We saw, obviously, the huge damage done by the mini-budget, the chaotic, huge unfunded cuts in taxes for the richest people in the country that has done permanent damage, and people are now paying higher mortgages as a result of what's happened. But the one thing I did agree with Liz Truss on is when she described the 12 years of failed growth under the Conservatives. They've had one sort of growth experiment after another that has not worked because they still ultimately see this as a sort of trickle-down approach, which is really damaging. Labour set out an alternative plan. You've heard from Keir Starmer and from Rachel Reeves, a serious green prosperity plan, a way to grow the economy that I know you've had the Tesco's chair on talking about, and the important benefits that has for the country and for growing the economy as well.
Thank you very much indeed, Yvette Cooper. I think you might need a new umbrella, by the way.
No, I think I might. No.
Good to have you on the programme today. Yvette Cooper there, battling with the rain. And now let's